Hey, it's Mr. Horohoe. So this is actually take two, but hopefully it works. The first time the microphone didn't sound good, so let's do it again. This is a video on the introduction to geography. It's the first set of notes that we're going to be talking about this year, and so the most important things to write down are going to be in yellow, but I think it would be wise, since you have the time and you're watching this on delay, to hit pause and write down whatever you think is important information. So this is number one, introduction to geography. We will have several different sets of notes, and so it's really important to number them. Geography is the study of the physical features of the Earth and its atmosphere and the impact on the Earth by humans. So geo means Earth, so geography is the study of the Earth. It applies to all kinds of things, how we use the Earth, how the Earth is impacted by climate change, atmosphere. Geologists study the rocks that come from the Earth. So there's a lot that can fall under the category of geography. A lot of geography can be categorized by 5 different themes. They're kind of hard to understand because they're so similar in some ways, but I'll try to walk you through it. The first is location. It's a specific spot on the Earth's surface. Place, which is physical and human characteristics, and human/environment interactions shaping the landscape. Regions, how they form and how they change, and movement, humans interacting on the Earth. So I'm going to talk to you about each one. Location refers to a specific place on the planet. Usually it's referring to latitude and longitude. So if you're talking about Butner-Stem Middle School, for example, it is one specific spot on the globe. And no matter what globe you look at, with latitude and longitude, you would have the exact location. This doesn't always seem important, but latitude and longitude are these imaginary lines that we put on the globe, and it really helps us understand where we are in the world. So for instance, if you're out for a hike in the middle of a forest and you need help, knowing your latitude and longitude will really help the 911 dispatcher send people to your location. Whereas if you say, well, I'm somewhere in the middle of this forest, it's a lot harder for them to find you. Relative location refers specifically to reference. So like if someone shares a lot of common knowledge with you, you can sort of describe things. So for instance, with Butner-Stem Middle School, there's a Mexican restaurant down the street called El Rio. And you can say, oh, well, to get to El Rio, you would go down the street towards Main Street there, Central. And you would take a left at the post office and you'd take another left. Make sure that you take a left before you get to Dollar General. If you've gone that far, you've gone too far. So it requires a lot of sort of similar information. This is how you tell someone where you live if you live on a dirt road with no address, right? You say, oh, well, look for the big tree and then look for the barn or something like that. So it's a way of telling somebody something based off of the knowledge that they already have. Place is defined by the physical features or human features that exist there. So for example, Las Vegas is a desert. We are defining it based off of the type of land that's there. But you would also say that Las Vegas is labeled as a city because lots of people live in a really small area. That helps us sort of figure out what's the difference between a city and a town and a village or a hamlet. All these different things help us determine places. Human-environment interaction focuses on the land use by humans and adaptations that we make for it. So for example, the ancient Egyptians are famous because they were able to take the Nile River, which floods twice a year, and control it. So they were able to take that water and use it to irrigate their fields. It allowed them to grow crops all year round and be a lot more profitable. So taking something that already exists in nature and manipulating it for your benefit is part of the human-environment interaction. Region is an area that's defined by certain similar characteristics. Those characteristics can be natural features, physical features, human-made, or cultural features. So an example would be the Rocky Mountains. All the mountains are different, but they all look sort of similar. And so because they share a lot of similar characteristics, we lump them together and call it the Rocky Mountain region. Movement focuses on the way that humans and even ideas or products move from one place to another. When you come to school, you could be moving from one place to another. It could refer to the movement of people from Asia across the land bridge to North America. You could be talking about movement in terms of products. The computer that you're using was probably built in China and it traveled across the oceans to the US where you got it. So movement refers to how things just traverse this globe. There are 7 continents to know. Technically, you might have heard that Oceania is an 8th continent, but it's submerged underwater, so it's complicated. But the 7 that you need to know for this class are North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia, and finally Antarctica, where almost no one lives. So you have these 7 continents, and it's very important to know all of them by heart, because when we're talking about different groups, if we're talking about Simon Bolivar and I say, well, he was in South America, you need to know where that was. If I'm talking about Nelson Mandela in South Africa, you need to know which continent Africa is. So make sure you have these memorized. Oceans, there are 5 different oceans that you need to know: the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, Arctic, and Southern Oceans. The names are kind of arbitrary, but it's based off of the characteristics of the ocean, and we try to separate them to make it easier to talk about, right? If you're living in North Carolina and you say, well, I'm driving out to the ocean today, we assume you're going to the Atlantic, right? But it really does help to sort of label these to make it easier to understand. Maps. Maps are really important to talk about as well, and it's a huge part of geography, creating maps. So why do we create maps? Well, it's mostly to understand where we are and where we're going, but to also share that information with other people. Cartography is the science or art of map making. So in order to create a map, it does take science, because if you got a map from a 5-year-old and it says go this way, then this way, then this way, if there's no units, you can't really understand. If there's no starting point, it's hard to understand. So in order to have maps that are easy for a random person to get their hands on and understand, you really have to put a lot of thought and care into it. Types of political maps. We have political maps that are super common. They show us different states. We have maps that show us different countries. For example, on election night, you might see the U.S. and it's lit up either red or blue for Democrats and Republicans. All these different types of maps are useful to understand our country and to understand the world. If you go to space, it's all kind of green or tan. It's not really purple and pink and all these wild colors. Topographic maps, they measure the changes in elevation. This can be really important if you're going hiking. The closer the lines are together, the steeper it's going to be. If you're building a house, you probably want a topographic map of the area to know whether or not you could build a pool without having to level everything. It is really important to sort of get your hands on these maps for a lot of different purposes. Weather maps are something you probably use on a regular basis. You turn on the TV, they show you pressure systems, temperatures, precipitation. It's all super useful information. Is it always accurate? Not always, because it's sometimes a little bit of guesswork. But for the most part, they're accurate, and it can be really helpful in deciding what to wear. Thematic maps also exist. They're a lot less useful, but really fun to look at. Here's one of my favorites. It's of McDonald's. And so what does McDonald's show you? Well, it shows you population density. So for example, you're looking here and you see most of the McDonald's are on the East Coast. So you might think, oh, that's where they started. But actually, it's just where do people live? McDonald's is smart. They only put restaurants where people are. So the vast majority of the American population lives on the eastern half. So then you're going to have lots and lots of McDonald's near there. In the middle to the western part of the country, it's less because the population density is lower. And on the west coast in like California and Washington, where there's a lot of people, well, then it's super dense again, and there's lots of McDonald's locations. Maps can be extremely versatile and represent anything you need them to. Here's another fun one with the favorite college team for the U.S. So you can see North Carolina has the NC Wolfpack. New York has Syracuse. Wisconsin has the Badgers. You have USC out in California. So maps are extremely versatile, and we can use them for just about anything. So I'm going to have a really fun assignment coming up where you're actually going to create a map. And so we'll talk about that more in class. But for now, hopefully this helped you understand a little bit about why geography and understanding our world is so important. So the key thing that I want you to take after this class and do is try to memorize all 7 continents and all 5 oceans. If you can do that, you'll be ready to go for class. You'll be good. It is just really, really important to have that basic concept of our world nailed down. All right, well, it's been good talking to you, and I look forward to seeing you guys in class next time. Thanks.